When business met genocide. In 1933, when Adolf Hitler came to power, many saw it not only as a political shift, but also as a business opportunity. The Third Reich needed technology, transportation, and financing, and American corporations were ready to help for good profit. What began as ordinary business relations turned into one of the darkest examples of corporate complicity in crimes against humanity. IBM, the technology of systematic extermination, Hollerith machines, and the bureaucracy of death. IBM, through its German subsidiary Dehomag, Deutsche Hollerith-Maschinengesellschaft, provided the Nazi regime with the technology that made unprecedented organization of genocide possible. Hollerith punch card machines, the predecessors of modern computers, allowed enormous amounts of data to be processed with unprecedented speed for that time. The Nazis used this technology for the 1933 and 1939 censuses, where one of the key categories was Jew. Each person was assigned a unique number encoded on a punch card. The coding system was designed with meticulous detail. Column 22 indicated nationality, code 3 meant Jew. IBM's direct involvement. It is important to understand that IBM did not simply sell equipment and walk away. The company actively participated in the system's operation throughout the entire war. Thomas Watson, the head of IBM, personally met with German clients and maintained close ties with Dehomag's leadership. IBM provided technical support, trained operators, developed special punch cards, and continually upgraded the equipment. In every major concentration camp, there were Hollerith machines. In Auschwitz, a special unit called Hollerith-Abteilung handled prisoner accounting. The numbers tattooed on prisoners' arms corresponded to the numbers on punch cards, which contained data on arrival date, nationality, profession, and date of death. The system allowed the Nazis to track millions of victims with German precision. Scale of operations. By 1939, Dehomag controlled about 90% of the punch card systems market in Germany. The company rented, rather than sold, its machines, which guaranteed a steady stream of income and complete control over the system. IBM profited from every punch card produced, every hour of machine operation, every technical service. Even after America entered the war in 1941, connections were maintained through neutral countries. IBM continued to receive profits from German operations, with funds transferred through Swiss banks. Technology of deportation, IBM 8-Dus-S punch card systems played a critical role not only in record keeping, but also in the logistics of the Holocaust. Every deportation required detailed planning. How many rail cars were needed, which routes to use, how many people to send from each city. IBM machines processed this data, making genocide technically feasible on such a scale. The German railways, Reichsbahn, which transported millions of people to death camps, actively used IBM systems for coordination. Every train, every shipment was recorded with punch cards. The efficiency of killing was directly tied to the efficiency of data management. Ford Motor Company, automobiles for the Wehrmacht, Henry Ford, and anti-Semitism. Henry Ford did not hide his views. In the 1920s, he financed the Dearborn Independent, a newspaper that published anti-Semitic articles. His booklet, The International Jew, was translated into German and widely distributed in Germany. Adolf Hitler himself kept a portrait of Ford in his office and mentioned him in Mein Kampf. In 1938, Ford received the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest Nazi award for foreigners. Ford Werke, a factory in the heart of the Reich. Ford Motor Company's German subsidiary, Ford Werke in Cologne, became the largest producer of trucks for the Wehrmacht. By the beginning of the war, the plant produced 1/3 of all trucks used by the German army. These vehicles transported troops to the Eastern Front, delivered ammunition, and took part in Einsatzgruppen operations, mobile killing units. What was especially cynical, during the war, Ford Motor Company in America produced military equipment for the Allies while simultaneously profiting from its German plant, which worked for the opposite side. The company claimed it lost control over its German subsidiary after the war began, but documents show that connections were maintained through neutral countries, and that Ford AES top leadership was aware of what was happening. Slave labor at Ford factories. From 1941, Ford Werke actively used forced labor. Thousands of prisoners of war and civilians taken from occupied territories worked at the plant in horrific conditions. The workday reached 12 to 14 hours, food was minimal, and any disobedience was punished harshly. French, Soviet, and Belgian forced laborers assembled vehicles that were then used against their own countries. Profiting from both sides of the war, after the war, Ford filed a compensation claim for the bombing of its Cologne plant by Allied aviation, and received payment from the American government. The company effectively profited twice, first from producing for the Nazis, then from American taxpayers for damage. This remains one of the most outrageous examples of corporate cynicism of that era. General Motors and Opel, engines of the Blitzkrieg. The Reich's largest military vehicle producer, General Motors, through its German subsidiary Adam Opel AG, became the largest producer of trucks in Nazi Germany. The Opel plant in Brandenburg produced the famous Opel Blitz lightning trucks, which became a symbol of German military power. These vehicles formed the backbone of German logistics. Without them, the Blitzkrieg would have been impossible. General Motors invested in modernizing factories even after Hitler came to power. In 1935 to 1939, the company poured significant funds into expanding production capacity, fully aware that Germany was preparing for war. By 1939, Opel produced about 40% of all trucks in Germany. Technological advantage, GM provided not only production capacity, but also advanced technology. The company's expertise in mass production, logistics, and assembly line organization helped Germany rapidly develop its war industry. German engineers trained at American GM factories, adopting efficient production methods. Standard Oil of John D. Rockefeller Jr. had close ties with the German chemical conglomerate IG Farben, the company that produced Zyklon B for the gas chambers. Standard Oil and IG Farben exchanged patents and technologies for the production of synthetic rubber and fuel, which were critically important for the German war machine. Without synthetic fuel, the production technology for which was partly obtained from Standard Oil, Germany would not have been able to wage a long war. The Reich lacked sufficient natural oil reserves, and synthetic fuel became the solution to this problem. IG Farben in Auschwitz. IG Farben built a huge synthetic rubber and fuel plant right next to the Auschwitz III Monowitz concentration camp. The plant, known as Buna Werke, used slave labor from tens of thousands of prisoners. Conditions were so brutal that the average life expectancy of a worker was 3 to 4 months. Those who were too weak to work were sent to the gas chambers. IG Farben executives regularly visited the plant, met with camp administration, and discussed deliveries of labor. They could not have been unaware of the mass killings. The crematorium chimneys were visible from the plant grounds. Other American companies, Chase National Bank, and financing the Reich Chase National Bank, the predecessor of J.P. Morgan Chase, actively cooperated with German banks even after Kristallnacht in 1938. The bank helped conduct financial operations for German clients, including the sale of confiscated Jewish bonds. The Paris branch of Chase continued to work with German occupation authorities even after the fall of France in 1940. ITT Corporation and Communications for the Wehrmacht. International Telephone and Telegraph Corporation owned a stake in a German telephone company and continued to profit from military contracts. ITT produced communication equipment for the Luftwaffe and the Navy, as well as components for V-2 rockets that bombed London, Coca-Cola, and Fanta. When the war began and supplies of Coca-Cola ingredients to Germany were cut off, the German division of the company developed a new drink from available ingredients. This is how Fanta appeared. After the war, the rights to the brand returned to the parent company, and Fanta became one of the most popular beverages in the world. The story of its origin was carefully distanced from its Nazi roots. Kodak and the filming of the war. Kodak, through its German subsidiary, also used forced labor and supplied photographic materials for the Wehrmacht's needs. Many of the most famous photographs in wartime film recordings, including propaganda, were shot on Kodak film. Swiss banks, safes for the plundered Holocaust gold. Swiss banks played a key role in financing the Nazi war machine and storing looted assets. Gold taken from Holocaust victims, wedding rings, dental crowns, jewelry, was melted into bars and sent to Swiss vaults. It is estimated that Swiss banks accepted Nazi gold worth about $400 million at the time's value. Accounts without heirs, thousands of Jewish families opened accounts in Swiss banks before the war, hoping to preserve their savings. After the Holocaust, these accounts were left unclaimed. The owners and their heirs had been exterminated. The banks remained silent about these accounts for decades, appropriating the funds through fees and dormant account policies. Only in the 1990s, under international pressure, did the banks begin investigations and partial restitution. The complex role of the Vatican. Although the Vatican officially condemned some aspects of Nazi ideology, its financial institutions continued cooperation with the regime. The Vatican Bank conducted operations that helped the Nazis circumvent international sanctions. After the war, some Catholic priests helped Nazi criminals escape to South America via the so-called rat lines. Slave labor, a business model of destruction. The economy of the concentration camps. Concentration camps were not only places of extermination, but also sources of cheap labor. The SS systematically leased prisoners to German and foreign companies. The cost was laughably low, several marks per day for a skilled worker, even less for an unskilled one. Companies bore no expenses for social benefits, medical care, or workplace safety. The extermination through labor system. The practice of Vernichtung durch Arbeit, extermination through labor, was official SS policy. Prisoners were exploited until complete physical exhaustion, after which they were sent to the gas chambers. This was the ideal business model for the Nazis. Extract maximum economic benefit and then eliminate the unnecessary element. Hundreds of companies used this labor, Krupp, Siemens, Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler-Benz, and American subsidiary firms were among them. Prisoners produced parts for IBM, assembled trucks for Ford, and worked at IG Farben chemical plants. Profits from death. Companies paid the SS for each worker, but this payment was incomparable to the real value of the labor. After a prisoner's death, the SS appropriated all of their property, including gold teeth. Even the ash from crematoria was used as fertilizer or for road construction. Genocide was turned into a profitable enterprise where every aspect of human destruction was monetized. Numbers of horror. According to historians, about 12 million people passed through the Nazi slave labor system, about half of whom died. Hundreds of thousands worked at enterprises connected with American corporations. The economic benefit from this labor amounted to billions of Reichsmarks. How corporations avoided responsibility, legal protection. After the war, American corporations quickly distanced themselves from their actions in Nazi Germany. They claimed that they had lost control over their German subsidiaries during the war, that they did not know about the use of slave labor, that they were victims of Nazi expropriation. IBM stated that Dehomag acted independently. Ford claimed that it did not control Ford Werk after 1941. GM said that Opel was essentially nationalized. These claims were only partially true. Documents show that connections were maintained, profits were recorded, and information was exchanged. The Nuremberg trials and selective justice. At the Nuremberg trials, leaders of IG Farben, Krupp, and other German companies were prosecuted. Some were sentenced to prison for the use of slave labor in crimes against humanity. But American corporations avoided such consequences. This was a political decision. America needed allies in the emerging Cold War. Prosecuting American corporations would have undermined the authority of American business and capitalism in the global ideological struggle with communism. Geopolitics prevailed over justice. Compensation, too little, too late. Only in the 1990s, 2000s, after decades of legal battles and public pressure, did some companies begin paying compensation to former slave laborers. In 1998, the Remembrance, Responsibility, and Future Fund was created, into which German and foreign companies contributed about 10 billion German marks. Ford in 1999 agreed to pay compensation, acknowledging the use of forced labor in its factories. GM followed the example. IBM denied its role for a long time, but eventually indirectly acknowledged its involvement, though without an official apology. The amounts were symbolic, a few $1,000s per person. Many survivors died without ever receiving compensation. Legal processes dragged on for years, and companies used every possible loophole. Corporate amnesia. In post-war corporate histories, this period is often omitted or minimized. IBM for a long time did not mention the role of its machines in the Holocaust. Ford emphasized its contribution to the Allied victory while remaining silent about production for the Wehrmacht. This was a deliberate strategy of forgetting. Only thanks to the work of historians, journalists, and activists in the 1990s, 2000s did this topic gain wide recognition. Edwin Black's book, IBM and the Holocaust, 2001, became a sensation. Documentary films and investigations forced companies to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth. The role of the American government, non-intervention. Before Pearl Harbor. The American government knew about the cooperation of its corporations with Nazi Germany, but took almost no action until America entered the war. Isolationist sentiment and a powerful business lobby prevented the introduction of strict restrictions on trade with Germany. Operation Paperclip and Oblivion. After the war, America actively recruited German scientists and engineers under Operation Paperclip, many of whom had worked for the Nazi regime and used slave labor. This created an atmosphere in which uncomfortable questions about cooperation with the Nazis were discouraged, both regarding German specialists and regarding American corporations. Danger of corporate immorality. The history of the cooperation of American corporations with the Third Reich is not just a historical curiosity. It is a warning about what happens when business places profit above moral principles, when corporations are willing to work with any regime if it is profitable, when technologies become tools in the hands of criminals. Modern parallels. Today we see similar dilemmas. Technology companies work with authoritarian regimes, providing tools for surveillance and control. Corporations produce goods in countries with questionable labor practices. Banks launder the money of dictators. Pharmaceutical companies patent medicines, making them inaccessible to poor countries. Social networks become platforms for fueling hatred and disinformation. The question remains the same. Where is the line between legitimate business and complicity in crimes? The need for corporate responsibility. History shows that voluntary corporate ethics are insufficient. Clear legal frameworks, international standards, and independent oversight are necessary. Companies must bear legal responsibility not only for their direct actions, but also for the actions of their subsidiaries and partners. We didn't know cannot be an excuse. The importance of memory. 60 years of corporate amnesia show that without constant public pressure, without independent researchers, without active citizens, the truth remains buried. Companies do not admit guilt voluntarily. History does not write itself. It must be uncovered, documented, remembered. The history of IBM, Ford, GM, and other companies in Nazi Germany reminds us technologies are neutral, but their use is not. Business does not exist in a moral vacuum, and profit can never justify complicity in genocide. Questions for reflection. This history leaves us with difficult questions. How should modern corporations assess their responsibility? Is compliance with local laws enough if those laws are unjust? Can companies claim neutrality while selling tools of repression? Where does legitimate commercial activity end and moral responsibility for consequences begin? These questions have no simple answers, but ignoring them means risking a repetition of history. The memory of corporate cooperation with the Nazi regime must serve as a constant reminder of the price of silence, the danger of placing profit above human dignity. Conclusion. To remember this means not allowing history to repeat itself. The history of corporate complicity in the Holocaust teaches us that moral neutrality in business is a myth. Every decision has consequences. Every transaction carries responsibility. And when the stakes are so high, silence becomes complicity. The modern world faces the same choices as corporations of the 1930s, 40s. Will we learn from the mistakes of the past or repeat them? The answer depends on each of us, as consumers, citizens, people with conscience and memory.